Okay, hi. Here I'm just recording another short lecture. This one is going to walk us through homework number 0. Since we're still behind a little bit, I'm not sure I can spend quite as much time during class as I might like to. This is your first writing assignment, and it's a little bit different than the coding stuff we've been doing. So I think it'll give you sort of a different perspective on data science, and it'll help you thinking about some of the other issues that we'll be seeing. So the assignment is really just to get you to explore the field of data science, get you to think about where you fit within that role, and to really just check out some sources and to check out some other ideas. As it says at the top of the assignment, data science is an exciting new field, which is awesome and amazing, and it means there's lots of jobs and lots of opportunities and tons of things you can be doing and applications in almost every field. But it has the disadvantage that almost nobody knows exactly what it is. So as a result, this assignment just wants you to think about the roles of data science, the purposes of data science, and some different attitudes. So to do this, I'm actually going to use our friend Wikipedia here to just look up what some of these roles might actually be. So of course, if we look up data scientist, and of course it goes to the noun form, the idea of what the field of data science is, it actually gives a pretty good description of what the field is. And it's a concept used to unify statistics, data science, machine learning, and their related methods, which just means that it actually pulls from a variety of different fields. Certainly I'm in statistics, and this class is in statistics, and we use information and computer science being more specifically about coding, how computers work, about how we can use computers to get the best we can. Information science, which is about how we get useful information. So information scientists are more like librarians than coders, but those two fields work together along with math and statistics, along with our third circle, if you remember from our original Venn diagram, that talked about the applied field and how you had to actually have understanding of that applied field. So as you read it, I think I mentioned earlier that in some ways being a data scientist is like being a unicorn. It's easy to describe that you have, mad, wicked coding skills, you're awesome at math and statistics, you have a deep understanding of the subject area, and you bring all this together to really make meaning and define meaning in large data sets. In practice, very few of us are any of those, let alone all of those things. So the question is, how do you approach data science? How do you think about it in a way that's going to let you have things? And I want to start actually with a funny word, which you might not think of, which is the idea of being an artist. And of course, our friends over in the art department certainly talk a lot about what it means to be an artist, what it means to be doing it. But part of the idea of an artist is that it's somebody who creates art, practices arts, or demonstrates an art. And so the idea of this is that it is someone who works to make individual items of beauty, people who work to get inspiration from the muses, people who work to really figure out these, not just meaning from data, but really this understanding, this beauty that lives inside of the patterns that are inside of data. So the idea of a data scientist as artist is maybe a funny idea, but it's one that I think certainly some people think that's what a data scientist does. And maybe it's what you think you want to do, and it's a way that you can think about how we approach problems. The second idea is that you're going to think of it as a statistician does. And again, the definition here isn't very useful. A statistician is a person who works in statistics. But the idea is that statisticians not only use mathematical idea, but they use logic so that they can build models, and they try to explain things from data. In many ways, statisticians are naturally data scientists, but in other ways, data scientists really do a lot more than just what statisticians do. So someone like me who comes from statistics, it's really about how do I unlearn the things that I learned in regular statistics so that I can move away from p-values, which for instance in data science are not as useful as they are in regular statistics, and how do I embrace these model-driven simulation-based techniques that also can give us some really good meaning. Another idea is the idea that a data scientist is a kind of scientist. And of course, it has the word scientist in its name. So you might think that a data scientist would naturally be a scientist. And a scientist is someone who does scientific research. So if you think about the scientific method, if you think about the idea that science is this idea that you go out and explore, you take hypotheses, you go out and collect data that you use to confirm a hypothesis or refute the hypothesis. Certainly that's a lot of what a data scientist does as well. And again, whether or not the kind of data science you might be interested in doing, the kind of data you expect to interact with, will you have hypotheses before you find the data? Will you be more of an explorer who, rather than having a hypothesis that you confirm or refute, you're instead thinking about just what's lying there as you kind of wander around. Another word you'll see a lot is an analyst. An analyst is a very broad term, and of course the definition here in Wikipedia is an analyst is someone who does an analysis. And where's the data analyst? Anyway, somebody who really does analysis of data would be a data analyst. And many of the jobs you would see for people who have a minor in statistics when they graduate, or even somebody with a major, or somebody who's just taken a couple classes, is that a company wants you to take their data and they want you to analyze it. And so often that implies a lower level of investigation rather than a scientist who's really trying to prove these big, highfalutin, fancy hypotheses. Somebody who's doing data analysis is probably using spreadsheets, or they're using Minitab. They might use R, the software that we're learning, to do this analysis, but often they're doing something that's much more repetitive. So for instance, someone at a factory who does quality analysis, a quality control specialist who looks to rebuild the same model over and over again. An actuarial analyst is someone who, rather than designing new insurance models, they instead apply the insurance models you have in updated ways based off new information they have. Maybe health treatments have changed, maybe expectancies or accident rates have changed. And so a data analyst is sometimes thought as a lower level than a statistician or a scientist, but certainly there are a lot of jobs for that. And many people whose title is analyst are really doing a lot higher order thinking than I just sort of described. Another word is a programmer, right? And a programmer is someone who programs, or a coder is someone who codes. And certainly what we're talking about a lot in this class is the actual details of coding. How do we take an idea and turn it into actual software? How do we take the software that we can have, and how do we build a script that'll do the thing we have, especially because often we're trying to build repeated analyses. So just like I talked about how an analyst is going to run that same analysis over and over again, a programmer is going to figure out how to do that similar analysis in the simplest way possible with the least effort. So you could just imagine every day you run the same script on the previous day's data, and it adds it to your model to try to make a more complete model. Another one that I think about is the idea of an engineer. And I think I've mentioned that I have my master's and PhD is in industrial engineering, which is a kind of engineering that we look at here. But certainly the idea that engineers are looking to figure out how to not just do science, how to not just build things, how to not just make things, but to do it in ways that are practical. So many data engineers think about, how are we going to run that algorithm more effectively, more efficiently, more quickly, especially an algorithm that we're going to have to run multiple times, like I was just mentioning, that a programmer or analyst might do. An engineer might try to go a step above that or a step behind that to try to figure out how are we going to make that system feasible under a variety of settings. So a data engineer it's a term that we don't use very much, but often this practice of engineering is exactly what we want our data scientists to do. And so to have you kind of be an inventor, to have you think about what would be market considerations, to have you think about the logistics of how we make this really beautiful model work in real life. Technician is a term, a technician is a term that we use. And again, often it doesn't have a positive connotation because typically it's really focused on the practical applications. Many people whose job title as a technician have 2-year degrees rather than bachelor's degrees or advanced degrees. And so we tend to think that this is a lower order of a position, and instead of really inventing solutions or implementing solutions, there's someone who take a solution and just kind of keep it working. That being said, if you think about somebody like a car mechanic, an electrician, a plumber, they actually have some pretty awesome skills. And so to say that we're going to do that kind of stuff with data is less good, I think is really underselling the importance of that. And certainly when you think about the times that you need a plumber, it's exactly the thing you need and you're willing to pay for it. And so people who are data technicians, like I said, many times they're doing sort of the lower level activities. Some people who have the title data technician are actually doing data entry, or they're doing data cleaning. And again, we need those people. Most of us like to think that we're not doing that work all the time. Again, most all of us do it some of the time because sometimes the work needs to be done. And if what you need is a plumber and there's no plumber around, you get the wrench out and you do the plumbing that needs to be done. So another word that comes up in data science is the idea of being an entrepreneur. And an entrepreneur is a person who really thinks about business opportunities, somebody who really thinks about creating new solutions. If you think about Shark Tank, if you think about these ideas, data entrepreneurs are people who try to think of new ways to use data in new ways. The more broad term entrepreneur usually applies to someone who starts their own business, but within some larger businesses, people who are doing data entrepreneur work is actually a fairly common thing. Again, it's not a job title you see very much, but certainly the idea that people who are working at big companies like 3M or Google for that matter, the idea of what are new ways we can think of how to use data in order to get useful things, in order to help make decisions, is certainly a thing that we want to think about. The last one I want to mention is a word that is sort of a hip word right now, and that's the word artisan. And of course, we all like to get our artisanal bagels or our artisanal handmade furniture or whatever. And an artisan is someone who sort of lives between what we think of an engineer doing, which is very practical, very efficient, and an artist, someone who's trying to be very creative, finding new ways to solve problems. So an artisan is typically someone, craftsman is a similar word that sometimes we use in the same way. Artisan is this idea that you're taking data, a data artisan at least, you're taking data and you're trying to find ways that you can use it over and over again in efficient ways, but also really do appreciate the beauty and the fine workmanship that you can get out of making a good algorithm or a good model. And so this idea of being a data artisan, again, you probably aren't going to find any job postings saying we want to hire a data artisan. But I think in some ways this way of thinking about being an artisan, somewhere between an engineer and an artist, is maybe kind of the most exciting and certainly the thing that companies need, even if they don't, put it in the job title. So that's sort of just a quick run through of just a variety of roles that we could imagine data scientists and people who work with data doing. This homework 0 assignment asks you to look at these roles and think about which ones you might want to have. The second part of the assignment gives you a few data science web pages that try to describe what data science is. And I ask you to look at a few of those, maybe use your own Google wizardry and try to find a couple others and look at what it says. Certainly some of these postings are about how we need people with data science skills. The McKinsey report is one that people like to talk about, which is the idea that in the year 2020, we're going to be 200,000 skilled workers short for the data revolution that we need. And that is actually a couple-year-old data, and it might even be more by now. It also asks you to think about the data science Venn diagram that we showed the other day. I can pull it up again because it's right here. This idea that data science involves this mix of math and statistics knowledge, coding or hacking skills, and then substantive experience in the actual field. As you think about your own skill already, probably you're not very deeply into maybe any of them or maybe just one of those areas. But as you think about where you want to be, would you really want to be a data scientist, this sort of unicorn that we talk about? Do you just want to have enough coding skill that maybe you can hang out with the real coders or you can be their boss? Maybe you want to be really working in real research and you just want to have enough statistics skill and enough hacking skills that you can do the science that you need to do. So this homework assignment asks you to think about those. Again, we don't have too many of these assignments that ask you to do writing, but in this particular one, for each of the questions that are listed, I would like you to write a paragraph about each one, and then maybe the fifth one, give a little bit longer one about what data science is. The last part, part 6, just says be sure to include links and citations for any news sources that you find. It shouldn't take you more than a couple hours to do, but I would like you to actually put a little bit of time into writing as well as you can. I know this isn't a writing course, but I think this practice of putting your ideas down on paper is actually a pretty good one. So that's an introduction to homework 0. Like I said, I'll be able to answer questions about it in class, but in case we don't have time to do that, I wanted to make sure you had a chance to interact with it a little bit. So thanks very much. See you later.